Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel Transcendence. My name is Christian Ramirez. On today's episode, I'm going to be showing you guys a compilation of near-death experience videos. You're going to see many different people with their own experience, and they're going to be sharing what they went through, and you'll hear many different things based on their understanding. Sometimes you'll hear angels, and sometimes you'll hear light beings. No sense of time. I'm doing this so you can see the similarities between all the different experiences people have when having a near-death experience. And I hope you enjoy.
It was the early 1970s, and I was 17 years old. I had been ill and taken a few different medications I shouldn't have mixed. And I went to a party over some people's house that I did not know very well. And I partied. And as a result, at some point during that evening, I lost consciousness. I can't honestly say I died. I don't know if I died. All I know is what happened next. At one point, I was just partying and having a good time. And at the next point, I was moving down a large black tunnel. It sounds like a cliche, but that's exactly what it was. It was this sort of big tunnel, and there was a rumbling noise like deep earthquakes or trains going by. I guess I should have been scared, but I don't think I was. I was aware that I had a presence, a presence, but not a body. But it wasn't like I said, oh, well, I don't have a body. I just was where I was at, and I could see around myself. And as I got to the end of this tunnel, I came into a world or a place where flowers were huge, and the grass and the colors were so vividly beautiful and vibrant, and everything was alive. The grass, the flowers, and I realized they're alive in this life, but that's not what I'm talking about. They were alive in a way that they were communicating and part of me, and I was part of them. And I was somehow moving over this scenario when I was taken into a place, and I don't remember by whom.
And that's where I lost consciousness. I collapsed, and I hit my head on the pavement again, kind of opened up my forehead pretty good, and I lost consciousness, but there was no break in my awareness. I was here, and then I was not. And the most difficult to explain is that time and space disappeared at that point. There was no time. There was only just right now. And that's kind of disorienting. It's a beautiful state of mind to be in, but it's hard to explain.
And obviously all this time I was in a coma and couldn't see anything they were doing. But actually I could. Unbeknownst to everyone around me, I could see and feel and hear what everybody was doing. It was like I had entered into like a state of clarity. And then time is very different in that realm, so I'm trying to put everything into a sequence, but it doesn't happen in a sequence in that realm, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. It's like we process time as linear over here. We recall things and we put them into a linear sequence, but in that realm, it felt like all of time was happening simultaneously, all at once. It was like I had 360-degree peripheral vision, so I could see, hear, and feel everything at once, but not just what was happening in that hospital room. And I was in a hospital in Hong Kong, by the way. I could see, hear, and feel things that were happening way beyond the hospital room, way beyond this life.
Now, the me before would have told you that with such an illness, given that kind of severe bacterial meningitis is a perfect model for human death. In fact, it's so perfect that almost nobody ever comes back to tell the tale. And that's why my story has garnered significant attention in the medical and scientific communities. Because, in fact, using the thinking of that conventional neuroscience, given the destruction that was apparent to my doctors through neurologic exams and scans and lab values, I should have had no experience at all. And I was rescued by a spinning white light, perfect pure white light with fine white and gold filaments that opened up like a rip in the fabric around me into a lovely gateway valley, a perfect, ultra-real valley, lush with life.
I did it. Like, I died, but then I was like, holy shit, I'm not dead at all. And I am so much better than I ever was. Felt like I was secure and that nothing could ever go wrong. There was no anxiety, no depression, no heartache, no guilt, no shame. All the stuff that I carried in my body was completely removed and gone. I was home. I'm looking down at my body, but if we're in an ambulance at this point, I'm looking down at paramedics working on me. This is when this kind of review started happening. Everyone that I encountered, every single other person, I could feel what I had done to them. I'm feeling their pain, I'm feeling their sorrow, I'm feeling their anger. God, there was a lot of that. I'm feeling that from their point of view, and then I'm also feeling those that I did do good with as well. I'm feeling that joy or excitement or things in that nature more on the positive side. But like I said, way more negative. There was no judgment. I was the judge, jury, the prosecutor. I was everything about the judge of my own life. It was me judging myself on what I could have done better or could have changed. There was this blueprint of my life, and there was challenges put in place for me to overcome. And it was obvious that I didn't pass any. It was obvious that nothing I did actually accomplished anything, and all of these challenges were still there. They were, unfinished. For me, it was just like, it's not a disappointment, but for me, it was like, oh man, I couldn't even get one thing right on this list. It was obvious that I totally failed.
Was dropping, and I collapsed very quickly. I know I wasn't aware of this because I was already passed out, but my friends had said that I quickly went into respiratory failure. You develop a very distinctive sound called a stridor, and it's just basically your body trying to get the air into your lungs. And you've got your sternocleidomastoid ligaments here that were just putting my chest up and trying to get the oxygen in, but it's making like it's a sea lion noise to get the air in. Now, I was totally unaware of all of this because I was instantly transported to another realm. I was suspended within this huge coliseum, and I was actually suspended in the air in between these two massive columns, but the columns went, miles and miles from either side, and the coliseum was behind me. There were stairs, like 1,000 stairs that were coming up to this coliseum, and the coliseum was made of this brilliant light that I would explain. But the most important part of this, suspended in the air, was I had this incredible presence on my right hand side. Now, I had no physical form at this time. I can only assume that I was this beam of energy that I felt a part of this greater light.
But I was guided into this area where a bright light in the distance began to get closer and closer. And as the light got closer and closer, it just encompassed me in a full way that's not really possible to explain here. It wrapped me in a feeling of total peace and comfort that I had never known before and have never known since. And as this happened, I rapidly began to ask questions. Now, when I say ask questions, this isn't in the way we communicate in this world. It was as if the second I began to think the question, the answer was given to me in a multitude of ways. I would know it from its history or its reasons it was happening. For instance, I said at one point, what is the meaning of life? And this being, who I personally believe was God, or at least a representative of God, if not God himself, communicated to me not the word love, but the understanding of love. An understanding of love that I really couldn't have had before, because I just thought, well, love, you love your mother, you love your dog, peace, love, all that. But it wasn't that. It was a love that was total and all-encompassing.
Everything that was dead was now alive. So my grandfather showed up and he looked beautiful. He had died in his 70s, but in heaven, he just was glowing with light, and he came towards me. He had this look in his eye that communicated with telepathy, much like the angels, and we spent some time together. And I saw this light farther away that kind of looked like a sun. And he very quickly said, "Do you want to go there?" And I said, "Yes." And my soul just flew towards this light. And as I got closer to that light, everything that had been painful in my childhood, the poverty, the neglect, the emotional abuse, all of that seemed to wash away. That wasn't your fault. You're loved, you're perfect, you're fine. Nothing could harm me. I felt completely free. And I didn't want to leave that realm because you can't imagine that love. It's so intense and we don't feel anything like it here. We feel glimpses of it here. Loving a child, loving your parents, loving, your spouse. It's all just it's not the same. This is complete. And those are just pieces is the only way I can describe it.
It's the key that helped me to understand the reality of the journey. But that was 4 months after I came out of the coma. Deep in the middle of coma, her message to me was most assuring. And just to recall it now just gives me shivers because of the beauty and the joy and the all-encompassing love that was part of it. And she never said a word, this beautiful girl on the butterfly wing with sparkling blue eyes and high cheekbones, high forehead, wide smile. But her thoughts came straight into my awareness. And these I share with all of you because they are important for all of us. This is the central message. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. There is nothing you can do wrong in that realm. In a strict sense, we have the choice of free will that God gives us through that intense love God has for each and every one of us personally. And that's why it's such a gift, because God has to feel our pain even more than we do when we use that free will to forget our connection to the divine and to each other.
And that was when I released. I just let go. And as I let go, the pleasurable sensation started there. Peace and tranquility and quiet and relaxation and contentment, those kinds of emotions. And then they started ramping up stronger and stronger and stronger to a state of utter bliss. It was so beautiful. And I somehow became aware of a point of white light. And I don't know how I knew that, but I knew I had to go toward the light. And as I did that, the light got bigger and more beautiful and more intense until utterly absorbed me. And I was the white light. It was infinite love. I mean, that's a big word, infinite. It was so perfect and complete. It was like wave after wave of cleansing white love. And it was just utterly liberating. It was beautiful. It helps me to close my eyes. I can go kind of right there when I do it. It was so perfect.
It was more like wherever I put my awareness, there I was. So I then became aware of my father. My father had passed away 10 years prior to me having this experience. And there he was. I felt he was there to greet me. It felt as though my father wasn't the only person that was there, but he was the first person I recognized. And it wasn't his physical body. It was more like a pure consciousness or his essence or his soul. There were other beings around, but I didn't recognize them from this life.
The energy that I had here on my right-hand side was very overpowering, very comforting. And I have no idea what that feel was. If I didn't have 360-degree perception, I would have just assumed that I was against one of these huge columns that I was in between. But there was nothing behind me. So I don't know if it was my higher self, a spirit guide, or part of your soul family. Now, going back to the light, the brilliant light there, the only way that I've learned to explain it is when you're in a science class and you have a prism and you talk about refraction, the light shines through this prism. So you have the beam of light and you have the rainbow that manifests within it, and it's that incredible mixture of this beautiful white light with color within it. I would call that the universe or God. I really think it was so immense, and that was what emitting that feeling of peace and comfort.
And then he's like, I want you to come over here. I want you to follow me. Then he brought me into this light room, and this is where there was 3 beings. There was 2 women and there was 1 male guide. So the 2 women, they had like Victorian clothing, and then the guy had tribal clothing. So I do believe that these people were part of the soul family or guides. They did have a glow to them, kind of light energy, but everything out there was light energy. It's just degrees of how bright and how not bright. So they were brighter than my brother. They kind of lit up more, and my brother was more kind of dimmed down. These beings told me that you have a job to do. You're not done.
You have to complete things. You have a better life that could be waiting for you. You don't have to go back. We're not forcing you to go back, but we highly, highly recommend you go back. From that level, the soul level, there was no choice. It was obvious I'm going back. Because I just saw how badly I screwed everything up. And I want to go fix it.
At another point, I asked about creation on other planets or other universes, other galaxies. Was this possible? And the second I thought this, I was transported. I could only think light years, but I didn't really know what time or space was. It wasn't like it is here. And I was transported to other areas where I saw people living. Some of them seemed to have like Roman garb on. I then was taken to an area where it was shown to me the creation of the world. And this was shown in a way as if a giant tablet appeared in space and all the history of the world unfolded in me rapidly. Yet I understood everything, and I was part of all things that had happened somehow. I was connected to this, and I could understand it. I could understand so many things so rapidly and completely that there is no way to explain this to anybody.
I put together 9 hypotheses. There were actually others that I entertained with colleagues in trying to explain this experience as a brain-based mechanism. I was completely blown away by the power of that ultra reality, as are so many others who have near-death experiences. And it's something that, of course, we cannot really put into words. And that's part of the trouble of coming back and talking about a realm with butterflies and beautiful flowers and a beautiful girl and souls dancing in angelic choirs. Is people are tempted to think, well, yeah, that's a trick of the dying brain. Guess what? I think a better way to look at it is it's much more like Plato's world of forms. It's an ideal world that's much more real than this one. It's the world on which this material universe is based. And it's a realm with which all of our souls are very familiar because we've all been there and we all go back there. And it's a crucial part of this understanding.
And things that I would see weren't actually things. It was more like everything was made out of light. And everything was alive. It was very real, but in an experience like this, it's experiential. So words don't really say it. There was no time or space, but time and space are built right into our language. And so it sounds like a series of events, and that I was somewhere in a place where it wasn't like that. So I have no sense of how long it was, or because that just didn't exist.
It's just floating in this beautiful night sky, and I began to feel this connection to everyone I'd ever met. Sometimes near-death experiencers talk about a tunnel that they go down, but I was in the night sky, and very quickly I was just in the stars. And when I was in that place, I began to feel a deeper sense of peace because I felt this consciousness coming toward me that was like the light of God, perhaps. It was a light that was full of intelligence and peace and joy. These messages started coming toward me, and the messages are very simple. One was, love is all that matters. It's all that we take with us when we go. The other was, remind them to go to nature. And then I started to see little images of myself playing as a kid in nature and how happy I was. And then I thought, okay, maybe adults get too serious and we need to go play in nature more often.
When you explain about the Colosseum that was there, which was made of light, but the light, it's so difficult to explain, so strange. But if you think about on the earthly realm, there's infrared and ultraviolet light, but we can just see a tiny fraction of that. And then in this realm, it must have just exploded that I had that full range. And another way that I've explained it before is a pearl within an oyster. It's comforting. It's almost like a liquid. You're in this water-filled flow of comfortness and peace and the love and that unconditional love. People say it's like going home. Now, I was greeted by these 4 magnificent beams of energy that were, I could say, in front of me, but the perception was all around me. I knew instantly who they were. There was no physical features, but just either from their vibration or just from their frequency, I knew who they were. The first 3 beams were children who died on the ward over those coming weeks. So 2 of them were infants, and one was a 3-year-old girl.
We have these different bodies, one being emotional, one being mental, spiritual, and physical. the emotional body looked like a blanket, and it was a heavy blanket, a heavy dark blanket. Is there's memories that lived in the emotional body. I could see flashes of memories. It was like a storm. It really is like the weather system of a body. It was dark and gloomy, and there was flashes of light, and memory was held in the emotional body, not just the mind. So when I saw the mental body, it looked like a donut, like a halo, if you will, but just like a halo that Saints have, but mine was dark. It was a dark halo, and it was the same thing. There was this energy flow, like a spinning field of energy around the mind. I didn't really see anything. Like the emotional body was very apparent. Like what was going on there was wild. This just was like a spinning donut of darkness. And then the physical body, it was very dense, of course, because the physical body takes on toxicity. It was heavy, and it just looked sick. And then the spirit body is the electrical system that operates the whole thing. So without the spirit body, you can't even function. These bodies were very heavy and very dense for me, and they just got heavier and heavier. And then I needed to do something about these bodies. I needed to change them. I needed to lighten the load. After that, there was this amazing kind of holographic image that completely surrounded me in this room, and it was my future.
And of course, when I came back, I was still so absolutely awed and shocked by the power of that beautiful being, that deity at the core of all, in that core realm. That for me, the word God was too puny a word. It was a little human word, and it had a little bit of baggage, and therefore I referred to that infinitely loving being as Om. That was the sound that I heard in that realm. That is, the me before coma, the scientist thinking brain creates consciousness, would have told you the next step beyond the earthworm eye view, because I think the earthworm eye view was the best consciousness my brain could muster while it was soaking in pus. Well, in fact, that's why it was such a deep mystery that instead of nothingness, the next step from that earthworm eye view was one of opening into this white light in this brilliant, ultra-real realm of pure conceptual flow and of love and of emotional power in that gateway realm with the unconditional love and the beauty and joy down below me with all of those spiritual beings and the swooping orbs of angelic choirs above. And of course, yet again, not just the melody of that white light that ushered me in, but also the music of the angelic choirs above offered a traversal into higher and higher spiritual realms, as I describe in the book, ascending and seeing every bit of this realm collapsing down, even the spiritual realm and what I call deep time, a higher causality, collapsing down and going out into the core. Infinite inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with the divine love of an infinite being of compassion and mercy. Om had no baggage, and that's why I attached it to that being. But of course, as I started writing all my experience up and trying to explain it, I realized that to discuss it with other humans, I was referring to what some might call God, others might call Allah, others would call Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh. I don't care what the words are. The words get in the way. They make it look like it's an intellectual discussion, some high school or college debate. It's not. That world is absolutely real. And that is something that is coming to this world in no uncertain terms as this world awakens even now, which I think is happening for a very big reason. Now, it turns out the reason that I was so shocked by all this, as I said, the neocortex. Modern neuroscience would tell you that rich details of any kind of conscious awareness and experience depends on at least part of that neocortex, the outer surface of the brain, the human part of the brain, being intact. And that's why severe bacterial meningitis was such a perfect model for human death.
And at some point, I realized I would have to go back. And I pleaded not to return. And I was told, well, you must return. And these beings around me of light indicated you have to return. There's very important reasons. I don't recall what they said. I don't know what the reasons were. But the next thing that happened was very powerful to me and has always stayed with me, as has the whole experience. Although this sounds egotistical, I don't know how to say it other than what happened. Millions or at least thousands of these light beings surrounded me and began to sing. And when I say sing, they were making music of a beauty that was improvisational and full and complete like I've never heard in this world.
And then that light showed me more of my life. There were some elements that I didn't like as much. They weren't the parts that most people would judge me for. It wasn't the drinking or the partying. It was when I judged people and when I was rude to someone. That's what God showed me was not right, because I wasn't looking at the heart of people. I wasn't looking at who they were inside. I was judging them based on where they went to college or what clothes they wore, or if I deemed them cool enough to be my friends. And there was this one couple I worked with who actually prayed for me. They knew that I was depressed, and maybe they knew even that, there was something that they picked up on, that their hearts went out to me. So they kept me in their prayers. Their love was an observant love, but it was a love that participated in my life. And I saw, I missed out on some really good friendships because I was superficial and judgmental and lost in my own pain and darkness instead of looking at people around me. And I was like, I'll never do that again. And I'll always look, I promise, into the hearts of people. And that was my big lesson in the near-death experience.
So here I am getting washed and cleansed in the white light, and I became aware of some sort of floating sphere of awareness like me. There was another being. It was my dog, Skippy, who had died a few years before. Now remember, I didn't remember the accent. None of this was making sense. But it was my dog, Skippy. And now he didn't have fur and a tail and a tongue yet. He had no body, but he was a floating sphere of awareness like me. And I recognized it as Skippy, and he recognized me, and we were communicating. It was like telepathic and perfect communication. And it was love. It was Skippy. Oh, I love you. I like, where are we? What's happening? And he was loving me right back. We absorbed each other, became the same being.
There are a lot of other things we can do that involve learning lessons here, potentially pain and suffering to others that we may have to learn, residual lessons in a life review after we leave this world. But the message from her was very clear: unconditional love, infinite love of that creator. And in fact, in that beautiful realm, that was greatly amplified because the joy and birth in all of these souls down below was fueled by these swooping orbs of pure golden spiritual beings up above, leaving sparkling trails and emitting these anthems, crescendo after crescendo, the most beautiful, to say the word heavenly, of course, goes without saying, but as I put it all in writing, weeks later, I said that those swooping orbs of light above were angelic choirs. And in fact, the beauty of that realm was only the beginning, because those angelic choirs, just as that spinning melody, that white light that had ushered me from the earth for my view into that lovely gateway realm, music, sound, vibration. This is a huge part of the work that I do now in trying to take the lessons from my journey and from cultures going back thousands of years about music and sound, about using various audio patterns to synchronize the hemispheres and basically to duplicate the biggest mystery of my journey.
The communication there was way beyond telepathy. It was just this knowing and understanding everything about them. There was no dialogue at all. I'd love to say that we had this conversation, but it really wasn't about that. It was just about their greater journey. And I had a greater understanding of what their life journey or their soul journey. It was very little reference to their time on Earth. It's so real because, like I said, this was 16 years ago. And you will have vivid dreams sometimes, but to remember this in the detail that I had, and the fact that I was obsessed with this place for months afterwards, I just could not get out of my head this incredible realm. But it's obviously it's not what people say, it's how they make you feel, and that's what I felt up there is what made it so special.
And they were basically praising me and sending me back to do God's work. And at that point, the next memory I have, I woke up in a bathroom in this apartment I was at, and I began to look around for a razor blade to slice my wrist. Now this might sound very desperate, but it wasn't that sort of thing. I simply said to myself, I have to return, I want to return right now. I found a razor blade, and as I did, a voice very clear and distinct said, no. And at the second that voice happened, somebody said, I think he's in here, and the door opened. And I dropped the razor blade, and I went on with my life at that point.
Another traumatic part of this was coming back. It's almost like a post-traumatic distress syndrome was the time period that I was gone. I was literally out for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I thought I must have been gone for like a wonderful eternity, if not at least 3 weeks. There was so much information that I was understood and gained. The fact that I was still in this club, it just didn't make any sense to me. And I really grappled with that for a long time to understand the absence of time. And I was absolutely obsessed with this experience for months to come.
And there was another presence of some kind of floating sphere of awareness, but this one was more complicated. It was a masculine presence, which is hard to explain because there's no gender there. I didn't have a body, but he knew me. And he said, "Come here, I want to show you some things." And then he absorbed me. We became one, and I experienced what I could only call a download. It was like billions of questions were answered in just a moment, instantly. And I understood. I understood everything. How the universe works, what our purpose is, everything made perfect sense to me. And it was not like I learned anything. It was more like remembering. I already knew it. And I wish that I could bring some of that back with me.
And that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification icon so you can be notified when I drop the next episode. And until then, I'll catch you guys on the other side.